Okay, in this lecture, we're going to finally get to how to put all of your knowledge to use in writing an essay about poetry. So the first thing to do is to look at the Essay 2 prompt here. Select two poems from your reading that seem to share similar characteristics. Compare and contrast these two poems' structures, use of sound, use of rhythm, use of rhyme, use of symbol. Spend time really thinking about how these two poems are constructed. The lectures and readings cover that content, so if you've been reading, this should not be any trouble. Remember to quote lines of the poems for this paper. It is important to use direct quotation for your examples. Not doing so will result in a much lower grade. And then it has the standard rules of the first paper as well. Of course, you don't have to use Fry for this paper because you're going to focus very much on the structure of the poems, as you can see from all of these different categories that are going to act as points of comparison. So, the first thing to do is to select your poems. For me, I am going to start with the poem Out Out by Robert Frost. So, Out Out by Robert Frost, I'm going to actually create a blank document, and this will be how I annotate the poem. And then I'm going to go to Bing. You can use Google or Yahoo, and actually searched with, here we go, Out by Robert Frost. I'm going to find a copy of the poem. And I am going to copy the poem into my document here. Now I'm going to leave it double spaced, even though it wasn't double spaced in the book. I'm going to leave it double spaced because it helps me do my accents and it helps me just see the poem easier. Now, one of the other things I'm going to do is insert in this document a text box, which you can see me doing here. Draw a text box, and I'm going to make it the size of this first page so I can write some notes or annotations in here as I go. Now I'm not going to completely annotate this poem for you. I'm just going to go through some of the basics of how I want you to do it. So you would select your poem and you would set up your paper something like this for this one. If you pick a longer poem like this, a narrative poem. Now, although this is a narrative poem, it's using metered language. So we have the buzz, saw, snarled. So we can say buzz is accented, saw, snar, snar is accented, ed and rat, rat is accented, old in, the word in is accented, and you see how I'm doing my accents here. I'm highlighting the syllables instead of drawing the marks over the syllables, so it's easier to see. Now what this tells me, if I break this up into metrical feet, I do it using this marker, is I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 metrical feet. Most lines consist of 5 metrical feet. The dominant foot is an I am. The reason I know the dominant foot is an I am is because if I look at this first line, the buzz, saw, snarl, and right here I have an anapest, rattled in the yard. I have, out of the 5 metrical feet, 4 of them or anapest. And then if I go back to here and made dust, that's an anapest, and drop, stove, length sticks of wood. Again, I have an anapest, trochee, or I am, and I am. And if something happens with your text box and the line's longer because you do this, you just move your text box over. So the dominant foot here is still an I am. And I can go through this whole poem, and I guarantee you through this whole poem it would show that the dominant foot was an I am. And I would take notes on how the meter changes. The meter changes, reveal the saw is not cutting smoothly. It foreshadows the boy's danger. And I could talk about that. I could also talk about some of these, how the words snarled and rattled have the effect of cacophony. They are unpleasant and remind one of a saw cutting. And we have this where it comes back here. We can mark all of that. We can mark all these things, and that's what I expect you to do. So that's for a poem like this. Now, what do you do if you have a poem? We're going to do another poem like Leda and the Swan. So I'm going to go in here. Now I'm going to search for Leda and the Swan. This isn't a good one to copy and paste from. Go to a different one. And we're going to set up another document doing the same thing. Only this, because I know this is a sonnet and it has something called a rhyme scheme, is going to actually have two text boxes. So I'm going to do a text box next to the lines of poetry here. And in this text box, I'm going to do the rhyme scheme. Now, one of the things with rhyme scheme, if the words don't repeat, you keep them all singles or lowercase. So we have A, course, it's going to force a cap on you here. You got to go back and fix that. B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, G, E, F, G. So you have the rhyme scheme there to help you have the notes for that. Then you're going to insert another text box for your annotations. You're going to go in here and you're still going to go do the scansion. And you'll discover that this one is also primarily iambic pentameter. So you see here you have caesura there. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you have a caesura, which is a pause. Alright, so you have some basic things we can use to start building our comparison. So you're going to have these two separate documents, and you want to save one as to your desktop. Save it as the poem's title, and you save the other one as the poem's title. And then you're going to start building your paper. So the way you do this is, again, you open up a Microsoft Word document, you format it in the same way I talked about formatting your previous papers. You're going to insert page number at the top of the page, type your last name. You're going to type your first name and last name, your teacher's title and name. You're going to type the course, and you're going to type the date, whatever that might be, in MLA format. And then you're going to space down twice, and you're going to title this. And notice that everything is the same font. You space down twice again. Go ahead and left justify again, tab, and now you'll start writing. So you'll have your introduction. Your introduction is going to introduce the two poems. explain the basics of their forms, free verse, closed form, metrical, blank verse. Show me that you understand these terms and use the terms. And then state your thesis, subject plus opinion. And the subject plus opinion in this case would be something like Leda and the Swan is the superior poem because its use of closed form captures a mythological aspect through better than Frost's out captures death. So something about that. This is the one place you would put something about which poem you think is superior or which poem you think is not. Then you would start with your body sections. And hopefully you guessed this already, but your body sections are going to be your points of comparison. Points of comparison. So you might use one body section to talk fully about the form. Blank verse versus sonnet. In this case, one of the poems is a blank verse and one of the poems is a sonnet. And I'm not going to tell you which is which. I already mentioned it, but you should know which is which. Then you would use one to talk about meter and rhyme. Unrhymed, iambic, pentameter versus rhymed, iambic, pentameter. Then you might use one to talk about allusions and symbols. You might have a body section that talks about other sonic considerations like alliteration. Really, the sky's the limit. These are just examples. And then your conclusion will have you reiterate some of the major points in your paper. And answer the question, what does this teach me about poetry? Now, after you've done that, you're going to set up your Works Cited page, which we talked about this in previous lecture videos, but I'm going to show you again. So for this one, we're going to go to Al at Purdue. MLA Formatting and Style Guide. We're going to go to the very first page, which has this information. In this case, we're going to start with since we have two things from the same source, we're going to start with the editors, which in this case is Kennedy, XJ, and Dana Gioia. And then we're going to put that EDSs there. The next thing we need is the title of source, and that is literature. An introduction to fiction, poetry, drama, and writing. Now we don't need that other information because there's no other contributors that we need right now, but we do need the version, and we know that this is the 13th edition. We need the publisher, who is Pearson. Then we need the publication date, which is 2016. And then we need the location, which is print. That's how we found it. And we're going to create a hanging indent. Now, we're going to go ahead and put in our poems. So we know that Frost, Robert, we're going to do out, and we know that's in literature, so we're going to put literature. And then we're going to put the page number that out is on, which I have to look up again. It's in the Robert Frost section. $6.47. $6.47 to $48, and then we're going to put Yeats, William Butler, Leda and the Swan, literature, and then we're going to look that one up. $7.80, and that's a one-page poem anyway, so we don't have to put more than one page. And then we're done, because we know that these come from this source. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to take those annotations that we created and we need to put those in this document. So in order to do that, we're going to have to take this We're going to highlight everything, Control copy, Control V, and then we're going to do the same thing with out. We're going to highlight everything, Control C, Control V. And that's your basic setup for your paper. You need to put your annotations in there too, so I see your work. And there needs to be a lot more notes here in the text box than what I put. So I just put the very basics to get you started so you can see what my expectations are. But you need to put a lot more than that. And that's all there is to it. It's not that difficult of a setup to do this paper. I'm actually going to save this. As the poetry essay template, and upload it to Blackboard for you all to use as well. So I hope this video helps.